Most of us recoil in disgust and horror. I'd like to start tonight by pointing out the strength of this reaction. It shows that deep inside, something is going on, something that touches many of our deepest nerves, both as individuals and, as you will shortly see, as a society. Tonight on Man Alive, the first of a special two-part look at one of our darkest unspoken secrets, the enormous rate of sexual abuse within Canada's native population, and the profoundly disturbing story of how much of the blame can be traced to our main churches and a heroic struggle within one community to deal with the problem. Although most of the people you will see over the next 2 weeks are natives, it's important to remember that sexual abuse happens everywhere, on your street and mine. Only, for the most part, we don't talk about it. It used to be that way here. Slowly and with great difficulty, this is changing.
For the longest of time, I felt this feeling of uneasiness in my community, that something was wrong, something was happening with me, something was ugly somewhere, something very mysterious, and my feelings started to direct me to the truth. The pain is my guide.
Alkali Lake, BC, is one of the leaders of a new awakening in the Indian community. A community that most of us know only through its long and tragic record of alcoholism, family violence, and chronic unemployment. Over a period of 17 years, they achieved 95% sobriety at Alkali. They made a film about their struggle that's been shown on television all over the continent. In the last few years, they've given hundreds of workshops in other native communities. But lately, there's a different feeling at Alkali Lake. A couple of deaths and a suicide hang in the air. As every alcoholic knows, in the light of sobriety, the mind begins to disclose its darkest secrets.
Well, my abuse started at an early age, and I believe it must have been around 6 or 7. There's not too many things I remember about my childhood, but I do remember always being afraid of my grandfather and running away from him when he was around. And I believe that this guilt, this terrible guilt that I had, is what blocked out a lot of the abuse, the memories. Like the memories of being sexually abused by my aunt. I didn't remember that till about 2.5 years ago. And it only came about when someone in the group was sharing her own experience. And I remembered, hey, that happened to me, you know? And then I remembered the feelings of guilt, why I blocked it out so long, the feelings of shame and unworthiness, where is, I know affects my life even today.
I'd ask the child to talk about how they felt in home, where they thought they fit into the family environment. And that's what they drew. This child here was around 6 years old.
A workshop in Hinton, Alberta.
Got a real contrast.
10 healthcare workers from 10 different native communities. They've come here to learn about sexual abuse.
You're at home, you get a knock on the door, and it's an offender. And he discloses his offending to you. What are you going to do today?
I would, first of all, I guess try and get over my shock and say, well...
How would you have done it a year ago?
Probably would have shot him. 3 months ago, I would have shot him.
Strong feelings that become understandable when we recognize the incredible extent of the problem.
I know that some of the native communities that I work with, I get a reporting rate to me of in the area of 80 to 90% of the people within that community disclose it.
80 to 92%. That's a shocking figure. But perhaps even more shocking is that some of us believe that rape and incest are accepted practices in Native culture.
Sexual abuse within the Indian community started from a number of sources, I believe. One of the sources was when the early settlers first came to Canada, and the white men would take Indian women as wives, and then when the white wives had come to Canada, they would discard the Indian women. The second place is within residential schools. And I witnessed that having worked and having lived, first of all, the work that I'm doing now, and having lived in that environment as a child, where I've seen some priests sexually abusing my friends. The only reason they didn't sexually abuse me is because that, having been victimized earlier, I knew how to avoid that abuse. The other place is that since my work in the area of sexual abuse and family violence, I've done workshops, I conducted workshops in several Indian communities where the majority, I'd say 80% of the workshop participants would have experienced sexual abuse within residential school. That's both men and women.
The residential school system was set up by our leading churches with the good intention of bringing the advantages of our civilization to the native peoples. The idea was to immerse the children in our culture at an early age. They were taken from their reserves to live year-round in the schools.
When we were put into the residence, we were stripped of everything, our culture, everything. We couldn't eat our foods, our traditional foods. We couldn't speak our language, and we were forced to go to church. We were forced to do a lot of things that were not part of what we had learned at home. And I guess what really upset me was that somebody was telling the Indian people that they had to do what was best for their children, and that they were the ones that could provide that. And then this is what happened. This was the end result.
In the 50s and 60s, the residential schools were quietly phased out, leaving behind a great deal of bitterness. As the native people begin to break years of silence about sexual abuse, what is emerging in case after case is a causal link pointing back to the residential school system, to individual priests, ministers, and nuns. In Lytton, B.C., a dormitory supervisor was recently convicted on 12 counts of sexual abuse of children, involving 650 incidents of sodomy. Charges have also been laid against the Anglican priest who administered the school. The church is all that's left of the residential school in Lytton. Stained glass windows are all boarded up, waiting the time when the people can forgive. One of the facts about the sexual abuse of children is that the victims can become abusers later in life. Sexual abuse can spread itself from generation to generation like an infectious disease. With the right conditions, it can become an epidemic, and it found the right conditions in Canada's native community. Thursday night at Alkali Lake, after the weekly AA meeting, another meeting has been called. Maggie Hodgson of the Nietzsche Institute in Edmonton is visiting. 3 years ago, she helped do a community healing here, and out of it was born a small support group.
I was raped when I was in my teens. As far as I was concerned, an abuser should be castrated and hung. You know, I just had so much rage and anger inside of me because of what had happened to me. And during the workshop, sitting down in a circle and hearing an abuser's side of his story, why he or she abuses, was a real eye-opener for me. I never knew that abusers themselves are in extreme pain and suffering, and it really helped me to take a look at the person that raped me and see him as a human being, not as a an animal that should be killed.
I used to feel like really alone, like in what I was, what I went through. And just realizing that I guess that I wasn't alone was a real big relief. Because I not only experienced like the abuse, and I saw a lot of the abuse. When I got older, I thought that's what life was all about, was to be abused and watch it. I guess like when I grew up, I learned how to cover my fears through laughter and happiness, and I still do that today. I learned that my fears were from nobody being there for me when things were happening to me. I'm learning to control it by myself, learning to handle it by myself, and learning to protect my brothers and sisters, I guess. And learning to even protect my parents. I guess I made a lot of the hurts today happen to me because I guess I got so used to having pain in my life that I created pain to feel normal again. I guess when I was first sexually abused when I was really small, how I guess, I don't know, withheld sex from my husband for, it was my way of,
Having some power?
Yeah, having power over him.
Jane, I'm hearing you, talking about forgiving and the importance of it. And in any therapy, that's the long-term goal. That's the long-term goal. In order to move to that place, first, we have to have a safe environment to release our anger and our rage and our sadness. That can mean sitting down with a therapist and releasing that rage and that sadness and that pain. Don't get caught in the trap of a community's expectation of forgiveness. That will happen, it can happen, but that's a long-term goal.
It's hard to listen to. It's the biggest survivors group that I've been to. As you don't hear men talking about sex abuse, you hear a lot of Native women more honest about it and open about it, while Native men denied, like I did. Hear all the horror stories from women, but not many women hear what the men think. I worked at the school here in 1980 to 83, and I was let go because I was confusion on student. It was pretty hard for me, and my family, for my wife, and I had to tell my wife all what I did.
Breathe. Let the sound out. Let the sound out. Let the sound out. Breathe.
I was 11 years old. I was abused by a priest. I went to confession to him, and I didn't know what he was doing. Somehow he must have found my bed, like in a dorm there's just about 40, 50 beds. I don't know how he found my bed. He used to come at night. He used to put his hand under my blanket. I didn't know what was happening. Just didn't understand. So I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't tell anybody what was going on. I thought I was the only person it was happening to. I finally got mad and told him to leave me alone. I just kept turning over. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. He wanted somebody else, so I had to give him 2 names. One of the boys was my worst enemy. Other one was I don't remember if I give that second name, but I really felt guilty about that for a long time.
Let the sound out, Brett. Let that pain out. Breathe deep and let that pain out. It's okay to cry. It's okay to cry.
Well, I went and I saw this priest's picture in the Vancouver province, and I saw his phone number there. So I wanted to talk with him about abusing me, and so I made an appointment April 21st, 1986. And at that time, I just didn't know what was going to happen. And I waited for about a month before I went and saw. And then on the day that I was to meet him, I went to his office, and I went and he took me into this office and I sat down, and I didn't tell him what I was going to talk about at first. So he was sitting there at first, and I said, "What do you want to talk about?" And then I told him, I told him, "I want to tell you that you abused me at the mission, which is a residential school." And he stood up, and he was shocked. He had a look of shock on his face, and hands went up to his head, and he said, I don't remember. He said, he came to me and he hugged me. He knelt down beside me and hugged me and told me he was sorry. And he said, "Do you forgive me?" And I said, "Yes, I forgive you." And I just couldn't remember what happened. But after I remember, I started to cry when he was hugging me. And I just cried, and he kept on saying he was sorry over and over. But inside, I felt I had forgiven him. I felt good. And yet after I left, I still had a lot of anger in me, just full of anger. I go.
When I first heard that, of course, it was one of disbelief. I mean, just going from my own background and not seeing any of that, or not experiencing, or even think it was possible, that it was disbelief at first. And yet I think of it later, if it's talking to people like Francis or others, that there was some. There are some people. No one's perfect. And
Father Jerry Guyette is one of the parish priests for Alkali Lake. Last year, at an emotional meeting where many people publicly told their stories, he got up and made a tearful apology for his church.
And, my second feeling is to say, once again, as I said before, I feel almost responsible. I feel that I'm partly to blame, even though not personally to blame, but once again, I feel I want to go up and say I'm sorry and hug that person and say, "Hey, I'm sorry this happened to you."
Do you ever go out in the bush and holler?
Mm-hmm.
No? You should go with Tassie sometime, eh, Tassie? Mm-hmm. Eh?
The only time I ever holler is at my kids.
No. That's not the right place to go holler. Tassie, you take them out tomorrow and you take them hollering, eh? Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes I get scared, like nature and everything.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Your kids are much more tender-natured
right.
than those deers.
I come here and I'll holler right down from my guts and just let it out. Just let her have it, because the trees, the rocks, whatever's out there can handle it a lot better than me.
Mm-hmm.
And it releases a lot of tension, a lot of stress, a lot of hurt that's right inside me.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want you to do is, any time you want to be alone, and to be alone, to be with a Creator, find yourself a place like this, anywhere. Come out there and just holler. Right from down here, just let it out. And just let it out there.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Good. 1, 2, 3. How do you feel?
I feel like I'm nearly there, but
Nearly there? You want to go more?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Let's go.
starting to feel a little bit more.
Little bit more?
Yeah.
You still want to go more?
Yeah, I gotta, maybe my voice, like I'm a beginner and I can feel,
Feel it blocked
yeah,
in.
yeah.
Okay, let's go once more.
All right.
Okay. Feels good?
Yeah.
Huh? I think you got it that time.
Makes me dizzy.
Makes you dizzy.
Next week, a community's pain turns into a blueprint for the future, for themselves and for all of us. Because in confronting the causes of sexual abuse, the Native people have learned a lot they can teach the rest of us.
Alkali has so much to give. The people are so open and real leaders in this field. And I think role models are important. It's something we don't have enough of. And when people see the willingness to share and the willingness to do whatever it takes to heal, and that healing can take many forms.
Dealing with issues like sexual abuse is a lifetime process. It's not just overnight that we'll deal with something and we'll be okay.
That the offender, the abuser, has his rights too. He needs to be heard. He doesn't have to be psychologically branded as a demon.
When the Eagle lands on the moon, part 2 of A Circle of Healing, next week on Men Alive.